Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar dedicated to a topic that clearly raises a lot of interest, namely how to electrify your fleet without compromise. I'm Dieter Kwartier, I'm an editor at Fleet Europe, and I will be hosting this webinar. Before we start, I would like to point out that the information shared within this webinar is subject to disclaimers, which can be viewed in detail via the recording of this session. This recording will be shared on fleeteurope.com. In this webinar, supported by Jaguar Land Rover, we will discuss how you can make sure electric cars and plug-in hybrids are feasible alternatives for your fleet, and why the time is ripe to flip the switch. We have the honor to have with us today three experts, namely Mr. Simon Dransfield, General Manager Fleet and Business at JLR Europe, who is joined for the occasion by his colleague, Mr. Raynald, General Manager Electric Vehicles at JLR, and they will explain why the time to electrify is now and how you can successfully adopt electrified vehicles in your fleet. That is exactly what our third speaker of today has done, Mr. Hanno Klausmeier, Managing Director of SAP Labs France. He will share with us his company's approach towards electric vehicles. I'm sure that you will have many questions during and after this webinar, and we kindly remind you that you can always ask these questions through the chat function. We will gather these questions so that it can be treated afterwards during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Mr. Dransfield, thank you for joining us. I hereby invite you to take the floor.
Well, welcome to everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. Our webinar today will hopefully provide you some insights and answers on how to electrify your fleet without compromise. So, we're reviewing today's agenda. We'll look at the amazing growth in the EV market to date and why this is forecast to accelerate. The important components of TCO and how some of the key elements are impacted through adopting electric vehicles. And finally, ours and SAP Labs experience in launching the all-electric I-Pace and the Range Rover PHEV, and a reflection on some of the conversations we have taken with businesses adopting electric and PHEV cars in their policies.
Thanks, Simon. To put things into perspective, this is really key to look at the market dynamics. Sales of new electric cars worldwide surpassed 1 million units in 2017, which clearly is a record volume. As you see on the slide, it represents a growth of 58% compared with 2016. If we zoom on few European markets, electric cars accounted for 39% of new car sales in Norway in 2017, which is the world's most advanced market of electric cars in terms of sales share. But we very often mention Norway. We could look also at Iceland or Sweden, the next two most successful markets, having achieved 11.7% on 6.3% electric car sales share, respectively in 2017. And if we look at the first half of 2018, we see all the markets booming. One being Netherlands with a 3-digit percentage growth, and another very interesting market waking up, Germany, which is the biggest European automotive market, with a 60% growth of their sales. 2/3 of the electric car sales in 2017 were BEVs globally, and there are big differences from the market to another. And it makes it very difficult to really draw a conclusion between BEV and CEV. The uptake of electric vehicles is clearly still largely driven by the policy environment. The 10 leading countries in electric vehicle adoption all have a range of policies in place to promote the uptake of electric cars. There is one key point I wanted to highlight, is that we are always talking about the lack of infrastructure, but we always underestimate the number of charging points which are already available. And this develops very, very quickly. Across Europe, there are already more than 100,000 AC charging points and more than 5,000 DC, or so-called fast chargers at 50 kilowatt plus on the ground. If we take just an example in France, not necessarily widely known, that on the main motorways, you already have a 50 kilowatt charger at least every 80 kilometers, allowing in average to recover 100 kilometers range in 15 minutes. What is definitely needed to accelerate even further is clearly more EV products available on the road. We need more BEV, more PHEV from OEMs. At our little Jaguar Land Rover, we've launched 2 plug-in hybrids and 1 BEV this year, so positively contributing to automotive market electrification. More to come, as obviously just a start. Talking about the product, and especially battery electric vehicle, we've just launched I-Pace, then on a booming EV market, as I just said before, and a booming SUV segment, which is planned to reach almost, as you see on the slide, 25 million units by 2020. All this should explain the huge order bank that we have on our first BEV. But coming back on the EV market, the global stock of electric cars surpassed 3 million vehicles in 2017, after crossing the 1 million threshold in 2015. So since the new generation of BEV and PHEV launched a decade ago, more or less, it took 7 to 8 years to reach 1 million, and then only a year to add another million. So the growth of the market is clearly becoming exponential, and this is a fact. So 3 million EVs on the road today. If we look at average pessimistic scenarios for 2030, which is more or less in 10 years only, number of EVs in operation should be, you see it on the slide, 130 million units, 130 million units, more optimistic showing 228 million. So coming from 3 million today, clearly seems something will happen very, very soon, and it's much better to get prepared now. On the next slide, I wanted to highlight a couple of things. So beyond the already and still increasing charging public infrastructure, and probably even more important than this, more and more cities around the world are welcoming, embracing e-mobility. We see an increasing number of low or even zero emission zones, dedicated EV parking places, or even dedicated EV lanes. And we see, and probably the most interesting thing here, an increasing number of very comprehensive, very robust, and funded strategies, which was probably not the case a few years ago, from an increasing number of key cities being developed to switch to e-mobility. One example being Amsterdam 100% electric by 2025, but it's one example among hundreds now.
So, why electrify your fleet now? Well, the reduction of the CO2 footprint by businesses in Europe has seen many fleet policies come under scrutiny with their contribution to the overall CO2 output levels. With the introduction of WLTP and an estimated rise in CO2 values on many ICE products, EVs and PHEVs become a significant contributor in addressing the ongoing challenge to lower these CO2 emissions. When considering employee demand, we know the car can represent a significant part of a reward package. Today, we are seeing drivers' desire to access EV cars. Keeping employees motivated through appropriate car policies is clearly critical. Raynald just referenced there some of the government initiatives and incentives, but these are also supplemented by the city authorities as well, to support either EV adoption or alternatively restrict access to ICE cars. This can be significant in some markets in Europe, and obviously in the future, as these policies are more widely adopted, accessibility to city locations for your company employees in high emission cars will be restricted. So this leads to the challenge of mobility. We're seeing many new mobility solutions, as Raynald said, and providers launching in Europe today, in some way reflecting the dot-com boom of the late 90s. These providers have a strong EV focus, addressing the utilization and efficient use of cars in urban areas, together with ensuring future access to cities. In some ways, cities are leading the drive for lowering emissions and reducing congestion. For example, there are 49 cities in Germany alone where they already legislate on access, and even in Rome, 6 different incentives or restrictions are in place. These two countries, whilst two of the largest fleet markets, currently experience some of the lowest volume of EV sales as a share of their total market. And finally, we see certain industry segments adopt the EV philosophy and products quicker than others. Electric vehicles on a company fleet can be considered to reflect a progressive and innovative organisation. So as always, the focus does fall on the cost of ownership, the total cost of ownership, which we know is central to operating a robust car policy. You know, if we break down some of the key components of TCO, we can see some significant potential savings with electric cars. Now, the savings I'm highlighting here are relating specifically to the German market, and were sourced from Alta Vista, one of the leading independent data specialists in Europe. Firstly, when we look at servicing costs, compared to a vehicle with an internal combustion engine, battery electric vehicles require less maintenance as they have fewer moving parts. In other words, there is less that can wear out. Additionally, the requirement of oil is all but removed from the servicing requirement. And as all of us know, one of the highest cost contributors to servicing on an ICE car is the oil. Secondly, we talked about tax breaks. And in more and more markets, electric vehicles do benefit from significantly lower tax rates than the equivalent petrol or diesel cars offered under traditional company car schemes. And when we look at fuel costs on the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, there are lower fuel costs due to the improved engine efficiency from the permanent engagement of the battery during the car's operation. And while BEVs only require fuel in the form of electricity, and this fuel being significantly cheaper, especially if we're charging the vehicle overnight and benefiting from some of the lower tariffs available in Europe. A potential saving of over 40% on fuel against the traditional car. This clearly is significant. And finally, whilst not necessarily comparing like with like here from the traditional premium SUV, but against a direct competitor in the similar size market, in Germany, the I-Pace has an insurance rating of 28 achieved through delivering modern, optimized crash concepts. This has resulted in a saving of 42%. So when talking about total cost of ownership, we have to reflect on the residual value and the challenge this is faced with regards to electric vehicles entering the market. We are obviously aware that this is a strong debate and many opinions on future residual values on the performance of electric vehicles do exist out there. Recognizing this, I thought it might be interesting just to briefly highlight the process that we followed to secure the most competitive residual values possible on the Jaguar I-Pace. We started back in 2016 with the largest leasing and data providers to exchange with them our understanding of the market dynamic today. But more importantly, where we saw the market of 2020 onwards, as referenced earlier by Raynald. Through 2017, we shared data, allowed access to the cars, talked about infrastructure investments, and continued market-by-market discussions. This was an amazingly insightful experience and education, and it was clear that there was a diverse level of knowledge and confidence in EV products across the European markets. This process, though, was a journey, and the resulting output at launch on the I-Pace saw significantly higher RVs than we originally anticipated. The car, in effect, has become the benchmark against which all future EVs from other OEMs will be fixed. Obviously, we already have mature markets in Norway and Netherlands, where we see electric vehicles already outperform ICE cars. As more OEMs enter the market with EV products and the infrastructure accelerates, and drivers' confidence and demand builds, the relative position on residual value performance for EVs will continue to improve.
So obviously, new topics have to be considered to implement EV in a fleet. You see key topics on the screen. We don't have time today to deep dive on each of them. Obviously, home, workplace, access to public charging have to be considered. Some questions like how employees having an EV as a company car will charge at home. How, as a fleet manager, I can follow electricity consumption of my fleet of EVs. How can I optimize the range of my EVs through training, information, best practices sharing among drivers? How I will ensure proper maintenance for my fleet of EVs? Well, a number of questions that could be answered in an easy way. There is absolutely no reason to panic. There are now simple and straightforward answers to all questions, or no questions, let's say, without simple answers. So it could appear as being complex. This is not at all. Just the fact that some topics are just new, or at least pretty recent, and not so many people have been exposed to them. So I said just before, everything is a question of having the right answers in front of the key topics. And all OEMs today, selling plug-in hybrids or full electric, have put in place the right programs to make it smooth. At least this is the case at Jaguar Land Rover, but not only. I clearly don't want to commit and to talk too much on behalf of other OEMs, but it's clear that all OEMs are supporting the customer journey. This is what we've called internally at Jaguar Land Rover a peace of mind or customer first approach to make sure that running EVs in a fleet is as easy as running a fleet of ICE cars.
Okay, so just before we hand over to Hanno, let's just talk about how we implement EV in fleets. Clearly, every company has a different dynamic, but some of the key steps we identified are shown here in the slide. Firstly, get a board sponsor, preferably the CEO, managing director, not just to sign off the new policy, but maybe endorse and promote the plan. Maybe they'll even become the evangelical lead for electric vehicles. We'll hear shortly from one such leader at SAP Labs. Secondly, look at evaluate and target specific car users. We all know that some people like to lead and set trends. Identify these early adopters, not those who are doing 300 kilometers a day out in the field, but those who commute daily to the office and who are influential within inside the business. Give them access to test drives early. Once an EV is driven, rarely are people not fully electrified. Next, incentivize employees. Possibilities could be parking access, free charging through the day at work, slightly higher lease rate allowance to really incentivize them into these cars. Next, educate, inform, and market the value of electric vehicles. Inform people about the options and compel them to choose an EV. There is so much information or misinformation out there. Provide a platform internally to support the knowledge, insights, and dispel many of the EV myths. And finally, market success both to the business and drivers to build momentum and adoption. As stated earlier, the ambassadors and early adopters are critical. And as we all know, peer-to-peer selling is very effective. One way to do this is to think about creating a community, a WhatsApp group, not run by the fleet team, but by the early adopters who can share experiences and insights. An EV community will secure a change in the company driver's mindset. And finally, obviously, you need to call us at JLR to get the right PHEV and EV product, arrange a drive experience, and secure information to support your move to an electrified fleet. I'd now like to hand over to Hanno Klausmeier from SAP Labs, who will talk you through the process he followed and how he electrified his fleet. Hanno.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon. Yeah, here's Hanno Klausmeier. I'm the Managing Director of SAP Labs France. We are a subsidiary of SAP SE, the software company in Germany. We have about 400 employees in France in 3 different sites. And yes, we are here responsible for research, software development, and technical support. Okay, coming a little bit to the electric cars. So let's first start with some general remarks. Our board in Germany, they decided that SAP wants to become carbon neutral in 2025. So 2025 is still a way to go, but nevertheless, you know that normally cars, you have them for some years normally. So how did we start? We started in 2014. It all was a little bit, the origin was, well, maybe a little bit earlier when I saw when I did a trip into California, I saw the first electric cars. Then when I came back a little bit later, we did the ISO 14001 certification. And that year we took the decision, well, let's start with a small electric car program. So how did we do this? In 2015, we started very simple. We started with 6 Renault Zoe, so the first generation with the 20 plus kilowatt version. And I believe one decision, which was certainly a good one we took, we said to ourselves, well, if you have electric cars, you need also maybe a mean how to charge them. So we also installed 6 charging points or 3 electric charging stations. So 3 charging stations and 6 electric cars, so which went pretty well. So we fortunately found exactly a couple of early adopters. Yeah, you need to have some of them. And well, the experience was relatively good we had with them. The people were happy. They were happy that it was so silent, that there no vibration, etc. So overall, it was pretty positive. So then when we realized that, well, that the electric cars were really working, yeah, then we said, okay, let's become a little bit more aggressive. Then myself, I also ordered an electric car for me. It's also important that the leader is also convinced about what he's preaching. Yeah. And then when we had the Volkswagen diesel scandal, we said, well, now maybe it's time we should take some tougher measures. So we said to our employees that starting with summer 2016, we stopped the ordering of diesel cars. Yeah. At the same time, we did a lot of campaigning. We did information sessions, etc. We had some other models coming out. Yeah. So we had more and more cars out of electric cars. In total, just a couple of numbers. We have 400 employees and 260 company cars in total. Yeah. So in 2017, we achieved our first objective. We reached 30% of our full car fleet was then fully electric. Yeah. Right now we are close to 50%. I just signed 5 orders this morning. So we are now close to 120 electric cars right now. Yeah. And our objective is to reach 80% at the end of 2020. This must be an error here. It's not 2018. So we want to go to 80% end of 2020 because we need of course to respect existing contracts. And starting with January 2019, we say to our employees, well, now it's over. You can only order electric cars or electric cars or electric cars. So that is what we did. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is here overview of our electric cars we have right now. You can see that we have here all type of cars. So we are allowing any type of electric cars from the Tesla to the Twizy. You can see we have here a lot of Nissan Leaf, a lot of Renault Zoes, significant amount of Teslas, but of course also a Jaguar I-Pace. When we saw the Jaguar I-Pace, we were really thrilled and we ordered immediately over 20 cars. Yeah. So this is here our overview, what we have right now. At the same time, and this is maybe very important, one of the key factors of success was that we always installed significant charging points and charging stations. So right now, we have in France for our 400 employees over 50 charging points, which is a lot. And we even have 2 fast chargers. So we did definitely invest in our charging infrastructure. This gave a lot of peace of mind to our employees. So the employees, they feel secure. They know when they're coming here to SAP, to the office, they can, without any hassle, charge their car. Yeah. At the same time, we provided also charging cars for the major networks here in France. We even ordered charging cars for Italy, because Italy is not that far away. And if employees want to go farther away, I don't know, Spain or Germany or even Scandinavia, we always tell them, okay, don't worry, we will find a solution for you for the local networks in the respective country. So this was certainly a big point we did. Then what we also did, we encouraged our employees to go for wall boxes. We even gave a small subsidy to install a wall box. Yeah, we did test drives on different type of brands. Yeah, from Renault, Jaguar, Tesla. So the people, they know, and it's always good before you order that you test drive a car. Then as we say, the appetite comes with the eating. So that's what we did. We also established a pool car program. So for those who ordered, let's say, electric cars with a lower range, let's make an example. The Renault Zoe, the first generation, only had a small battery. There you had a range about 130 kilometers. So what happens for them if they want to take a longer trip? Then we offer them always a kind of substitution car for the longer trips. Obviously, this costs some money, but I believe it was worthwhile. Yeah, and in general, we are very successful. We organized, of course, also information sessions. We have here a kind of web page, on internal web page, where the employees can inform themselves, etc., etc. Yeah, last not least, can you go to the next slide, please? Indirectly, this was, of course, a project or an action we did, if you want, because we have a social and ecological responsibility. I believe SAP, we cannot complain, our business is okay, but this means that we also have a responsibility towards society. Yeah. So the main reason behind, we want to do something positive for the world. Yeah. It costs, of course, some money, as I said before. But sometimes it's really interesting to observe that by doing something like that, indirectly, you generate additional business. So for instance, here, suddenly a couple of developers at our site, they became pretty interested in electric cars and charging stations, and they developed a software in order to monitor charging stations, which may create a new business for SAP tomorrow. So what I want to say here, sometimes actions for the environment, actions which are in general positive, yeah, for the world, can unexpectedly, this was not planned at all, turn out into new business. Well, with that, I believe that was my intervention. Don't hesitate to ask questions if you need more details. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanno. So really, in summary, we should be realistic and pragmatic, but not hesitant in planning and embracing the future without compromise. Maybe a 100% EV policy like SAP Labs is not the first step, but the journey needs to start immediately. So when reviewing your 2019 policy, understand that electric vehicle products should not be the driver or restrictor to change. The ambition to be part of the future, both as a business and individual, should be the catalyst to take up the electric challenge. Electrify your fleet today, not tomorrow. With that, thank you very much for your time, and I hand back over to Dieter.
Thank you very much, Simon, and thank you also, Mr. Roger and Mr. Klausmeier, for your insights into a topic that is clearly high on the fleet agenda. For those who would like to get in touch with either Jaguar Land Rover or SAP Labs France, you will find the contact details right here. May I remind you that this webinar will be recorded and available online afterwards, so you don't have to worry about getting the details right now. We are now moving on to the last part of this webinar, the Q&A session, and we have gathered quite a few questions already. The first one is one for Mr. Dransfield. Simon, what kind of companies have taken I-Pace into their company policies and why?
Thank you for that, Dieter. I think maybe the first thing we should say when talking about that, if you look at some markets like Norway and Netherlands, electric vehicles is the norm. It's no exception, and as Raynald talked about earlier, you know, they are over 50% of the markets in Norway. So all companies in these markets are taking the cars. But if you look at maybe some of the lower volume, lower adoption markets, yeah, it's SMEs that have first stepped into this space. You know, clearly they can react quicker to the opportunity of a new product coming out on the market, and they have maybe sometimes a larger flexibility on car policies. We've then seen obviously certain industries step into working with us. You know, we've talked about the mobility providers to access the cities, but companies in the tech business and the energy business, you know, and those companies that really have a high profile environmental credentials that they want to promote are clearly early adopters and businesses we're working with. And I think the sort of third element I would say would be, you know, the leasing companies. We engaged with them so early, you know, that they actually started driving the market on our behalf. You know, they started talking to their customer base and engaging with them and ensuring that they gave competitive offers and informed their customer base. So, you know, the Arvals, the lease plans, the ALD, the Alphabet, the Athlons, they've all worked with us in a really proactive way to, you know, make this car reach the right audience. The second part then, why? You know, clearly I would say working at Jaguar Land Rover, it's the fact that we've got a great car. And, you know, it is being very much driver demand driven. So, you know, the number of companies that do come to us, you know, where employees are actually asking of the fleet manager, of the managing director, you know, that they want to see this car and policy. So I think, you know, that, as Raynald talked about as well, you know, the availability of more products, EV relevant products on the market, you know, that demand will only increase. I think, you know, as I said, working with the lease companies and getting the right competitive rates, you know, we still have to have that TCO focus on the vehicle, and clearly we managed to achieve that. And then I think it, you know, at the end of it, as we said, you know, we've come full circle to where we are in Norway and Netherlands, where, you know, the electric vehicle is the norm. So, you know, the electric vehicle does fulfill all the requirements that a company car, you know, driving with you know, the internal combustion engine delivers, can be delivered by an electric vehicle. So, you know, in response to your question, you know, we've got a lot of new customers that have come into the car, but maybe the reasons aren't just about being at the forefront of technology and the latest. It's also having, you know, the competitive rate and a valid vehicle proposition.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Simon. There's a few more questions coming in through the chat function, so don't hesitate. If you have a question, you can use the chat function to ask them. The second I would like to ask is one for Mr. Roger. And yeah, there's quite a lot of interest from the people in the webinar, and they want to know what we can expect in terms of new products, because well, basically right now electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids seem to be confined to the more expensive car segments. So in general, what can we expect in terms of let's say a democratization of electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids in general, and more specifically within JLR? Mr. Roger.
Well, this is true that the product offer today is still limited. There have been a lot of announcements, but still limited number of BEV or PHEVs on the road today compared to the large product offer of internal combustion engine cars. However, regarding the positioning on the most expensive segments, so the comment coming in the question, if you look at some successful BEVs, like for example Hanno was mentioning Renault Zoe, for example, but also Nissan Leaf, Hyundai Ioniq, or the e-Golf, these cars are not positioned on the most expensive segments. So we could say the same, I think, for plug-in hybrids. I would even say that there was a clear lack of products on the BEV premium segment. So by now, nearly all major OEMs have clearly expressed an ambition or plan related to the development of electric cars. So the number and high ambition of these announcements indicate a strong industry commitment to invest in electric mobility, that's clear, and to scale up efforts to advance EV technology in the coming years. And this will be done across all segments, from the most affordable to the most expensive, as we see today with the ICE car. And for JLR, as I said before, the launch of our two plug-in hybrids and I-Pace, so the first BEV, is just a start, and we will continue to electrify all our range of products. So it's just the first step of a long EV journey.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question for Mr. Klausmeier from SAP Labs France. Mr. Klausmeier, one of our attendants would like to know if you have a clear view on the charging behavior of your employees. Do they charge mainly at home, at work, or on the go? And how long do they charge on average?
That's a good question. I would say there is not a unique answer. Yeah. I would say it depends on the type of employees. Yeah, I would say most of the employees, of course, they arrive, I don't know, at 8, 9 o'clock, then they stay for 8, 9, 10 hours in the office, then they charge at our charging station, then they drive home with a fully charged car. That is, of course, one case. Yeah. On the other hand, we have to be very careful that we do not oversimplify a population of a company, because not all employees are coming into the office and staying there for 8 or 10 hours in the office. It's not like that. We have consultants, they just stay for an hour and then they leave. This is why we installed different type of charging stations at our premises. We have now at the main premise here in southern France, we have, I'm not talking about Paris, Malakoff, we have here 10 charging points delivering 7 kilowatt. We have 14 charging points delivering 22 kilowatts. This is, we are talking about AC, alternate current. And we have 2 fast chargers delivering 50 kilowatts. Why did we do this? In order to accommodate different types of employees who have different profiles, etc. Who some are consultants, they have to leave quickly, and under developers they stay for more time. So that is the first part of the answer. At the same time, we always want to give the possibility to employees to charge at home, maybe or for the weekend, or to have more comfort, or I don't know, maybe the wife wants to charge because they can also use our company cars. So I would say it's a mix. Yeah, it's a mix. So there's no unique answer. And then in addition, those who are taking longer trips, yeah, they are then of course using our charge card. Here in France, we're using a lot the Sodetrel network. Those are the main fast charger we'll find at the highways. Yeah, so I would say it's a mix, but of course there's significant amount of employees charging here at our premises. I would say in average, it depends, of course, on the size of the battery. Yeah, obviously a Tesla, an I-Pace needs more time to recharge than, let's make another extreme example, a Renault Twizy. We also have one Renault Twizy, and the Renault Twizy is charging with the domestic plug. Yeah, so it depends really on the size of the battery. But let's go back to my original example, Renault Zoe, the new Renault Zoe with a 40 kilowatt battery with our 22 kilowatt charges when the battery is empty about 2 hours. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I have an additional question for you, Mr. Klausmeier, regarding reimbursement of costs. So well, I've got a few attendants who would like to know how this works in practice. So an employee takes his electric vehicle or PHEV at home, charges at home. How do you make sure that this electricity or the cost of electricity is reimbursed?
Good question. We are right now working on this, and I have to laugh because just 2 hours ago we had a discussion about this. So Ryan, I can tell you what we are planning because it's so far not 100% realized. We are pushing our employees to install wall boxes at their home. We are also pushing them to use wall boxes, so small charging stations, which can be connected to the internet. Yeah. So we would like to supervise. Some say, paranoid people say we want to spy on our employees, but that's not the purpose. We want to see how much they are charging, and then our idea is that we create an automatic interface to our SAP expense system, and then the employees, they get reimbursed for their kilowatt hours they have charged at home. And then regarding the price, we take an average French price for electricity. This is what we plan to have in production at the end of this year. Yeah, so it's still not 100% ready. We're right now working on this. We have now a couple of, let's say, early adopters or guinea pigs who are installing their wall boxes, but this is where we want to go.
Okay. Mr. Klausmeier, I think you are very popular today because most questions are directed to you. The next one is about the extra investment that is required per car compared to your traditional fleet. So I think the question is about the infrastructure. Do we have an idea on the extra cost that comes with integrating electric vehicles in your fleet? Maybe a difficult question, but well, I presume you could give some indication.
Yeah, well, of course, it's an absolutely valid question. Of course, as a managing director, you cannot be here a red cross now number 2, obviously not. Yeah, of course, you have to take a look at the cost and also the business. That's what I'm also doing. Now, I also have to give different answers because it's not that easy to answer that like that. So first, let's go to the cars. Yeah. Let's now talk about the smaller segments, Renault Zoe, Nissan Leaf, etc. Those cars, if you take into account the subsidies we are getting from the French government, you are getting 6,000 euro per car. Yeah, this is the official amount we are getting. We're also getting some other tax incentives like TVTS. I don't want to go into those details. Then I would say those medium-sized cars are not more expensive than internal combustion engine cars. Take into account again the subsidies we are getting. Yeah, first answer. Second answer, now let's come up with the higher segment, and there we're talking precisely about Tesla and Jaguar. Yeah, those are really more expensive cars. Yes, those cars are costing more. We defined here kind of eco bonus for the employees. Yeah, nevertheless, yeah, this is a part of my managing principle. If we spend something, also we expect that the employees is spending something. This means that, for instance, somebody ordering a Jaguar I-Pace has a higher payroll deduction than somebody ordering a Renault Zoe. Of course, we are giving more to this person, but nevertheless, we are by this indirectly controlling the cost. Yes, it does cost something more, there's no doubt, but we are letting the employees participating. This is the first answer to the question. The second one is, if it comes to the charging infrastructure, this is also a cost. We did this over time. We started 2015. In total, we spent at the main premises here in Mougins, we spent a little bit more than 200,000 euro spread over 3 years. Yeah. The first investment was 22,000 euros. We're talking about the three first charging stations. The most expensive were, of course, the fast charger. There we spent a little bit more than 80,000 euro. Again, this includes all material, equipment, digging and cabling, etc. So this is all in total. We can, of course, depreciate this. Yeah, but again, we had to spend some money. Yeah, but in the longer run, I believe it was definitely worth it, and we learned a lot, and we can now benefit from it.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question for JLR. I think it could be answered either by Simon or by Mr. Roger. The question is, well, it started with a statement really. Are EVs and PHEV cars really not only limited to office-based stuff? Field sales seem to be out of scope due to the limited range. So that's basically a statement, and if we can translate this into a question, well, is it like that? Are electric vehicles and PHEVs basically well limited in terms of usage to the people working at the office, or do you see a realistic scenario, usage scenario also for people who are on the road all the time? Simon or Mr. Roger?
Yeah, and I think Hanno could probably answer that, which he did about his consultants and how they manage their time. Clearly, you know, it's different by market, and maybe that question didn't come from a Norwegian business because, you know, these businesses are operating electric vehicles as they would do normal cars, covering all the range of jobs, because the infrastructure is in place in that market, which allows for, you know, a fast charge network delivering the appropriate support for people driving EV cars. I think the second point I would just raise is, you know, with the WLTP, you have 470 kilometer range on the I-Pace, and most of the cars coming forward in the future will have that and maybe even more. So, you know, doing over 470 kilometers a day in anybody's time is probably going to take you a full working day to complete that. So I think it's, you know, looking at the maturity of the market, we know the infrastructure is accelerating quickly, and also the job profiles. Yes, the job profiles of a field-based person in the south of Italy may not actually fit an EV product at this time, but, you know, that situation will evolve over the next sort of 3-5 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. One is a question, I think, for SAP, a question regarding charging cards, so systems to pay for charging on the road. So one of our attendants wants to know if the SAP employees get a kind of charging card, and do they have access to all charging points with this charging card? There are different providers out there. So the question basically is there one card that covers all charging stations? I think that's the best way to resume the question. Mr. Klausmeier.
Yeah, well, I have to give here a mixed answer. Yeah, let's now talk about France. Let's not make it too complicated, although I can give you an answer for the adjacent countries like Italy, Spain, Germany, etc. I know them also pretty well. Here in France, we are giving 2 charging stations, national charging cards. One is Soditrel, the other is Freshmile. Those are national providers, and those 2 cards work, I would say, with a lot of stations in France, mainly the national ones. Yeah. Then what we do in addition, we're giving an additional card. Yeah. At our main location, if there are local networks, like here, for instance, in Nice, there's the network Auto Bleu. We're also giving a local card to them. Yeah. If I would say, if there are charging stations which are not compatible with those 3 cards, yeah, then what we are doing, we tell to the employees, well, if you're living, let's say, in Toulouse, yeah, then we cannot take a local card for you. Then you take this card and you just expense it. So we cannot, of course, have cards from all over France in the pocket. That's not possible. But we also rely a little bit on the good intelligence of the employees. So we are giving 2 major national cards and 1 local card for the major locations. And if somebody needs a specific card, we say, okay, then you put it into expenses. We will then authorize it. It will not cost here the world. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Good. Thank you very much. I have.
Can we just comment on?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Maybe just Raynald Roger. So maybe just a comment on this one, and thanks, Hanno, because the French case is interesting. If we look at Europe, you have some markets like, for example, the Benelux, so with Belgium and especially the Netherlands, with our partner, but there are other partners than our partner. But with Plug Surfing, for example, we are covering with 1 app 100% of the charging stations in Belgium and in Netherlands. The same for Germany or for Switzerland. In Norway, where obviously a lot of EVs are on the road today, we also have 1 partner, which is Elbil, covering with only 1 card all charging stations. So it's very different from market to another. For France, so I've understood that with SAP Labs working with Soletrail and Fresh Mile, there is also ChargeMap covering pretty well the country. So there are more and more players than what we call the aggregators of all these charging stations. So it's easier and easier for a driver to really get a pretty wide access to the charging infrastructure very easily.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Roger. That's indeed a very clear answer. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you very much for participating. If you have any more questions, please do not hesitate to contact either Mr. Simon Dransfield or his colleague, Mr. Roger from Jaguar Land Rover. If you have any more questions for Mr. Klausmeier from SAP Labs France, of course, he will be available for answering your questions that you might have. So thank you for participating again. We hope you appreciated it. And thank you again, Mr. Dransfield, Mr. Klausmeier, and Mr. Roger, and of course, Jaguar Land Rover for your support. As mentioned before, a recording of this webinar will be available on fleeteurope.com. And before we leave you, let me stress the fact that we value your feedback, and so does Jaguar Land Rover. So please take the time to complete our short survey and share your thoughts on today's webinar and your ideas on electrification. The survey always gives you the opportunity to make suggestions and to tell us what you would like us to bring in the future. From us at Fleet Europe, thank you very much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye.